Hi, everyone, and welcome to the very first meeting of the H&H Book Club. How's everyone doing today?
Awesome.
Are you excited?
I'm excited.
Yeah?
Super excited.
You can always tell with Chris.
Well, I think our first topic is set, and we are talking new adult tonight. I know everyone's very excited about that genre, so maybe it's just me, because that's my new favorite thing. And it's been a really hot topic on the site, so first I kind of just want to get everyone's thoughts on the new genre. What are you thinking about it? Who are some of your favorite authors so far?
Who do you want to answer?
You, Megan.
Oh! Well, I have to say that I loved Samantha Young's On Dublin Street, and trying to think what else I've read in the genre. I actually, if we're going to start defining the genre, I don't see much of a difference between that and contemporary romance, except for there's a lot more intensity and a lot more black and white emotions. There's not as much nuance, I don't think, because I feel like that age group is so black and white and virulent in opinion, and I feel like it captures that kind of intensity and that vehemence. So I like reading it as long as the passions are intense and it doesn't make me roll my eyes.
Well said. Jen, how about you?
Oh God, you're asking me to follow up with that. Okay, so on the site I read Tamara Weber's Easy and reviewed it for H&H, and that was my first introduction into the genre, and I really, really enjoyed it. I have it here. Can I show it?
Yeah.
Here it is.
No, don't show it. No.
Here it is. This model, this guy over here, and this photo shoot have been on like every new adult book that I've seen.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm guessing because it's a photo stock picture and
yeah.
Yeah,
he did some investigating in it, and Tamara Weber was very disappointed on her site that these people were featured on like 5 other books.
Aww.
She thought she had like gotten ahead of the crowd with everything. But anyway, I mean, as someone who has read young adult for a very long time and has read romance, it is interesting to see how the two kind of intersect in this genre, because I think it talks about a lot of the issues that were talked about in young adults, but as Megan said, in very like black and white terms. In Easy they talk about rape, and they talk about following your boyfriend to college, and all those sorts of things that people who are 18 to 25 are faced with. And some people say that it's just young adult novels with explicit sex, or contemporary romance with young adult issues. But I mean, it is, but I think those are just issues that people in that age group face, and so it's not necessarily a young adult book with sex. It's just an issue that new adult people face.
Well said as well. Chris, the bar has been raised. What are your thoughts?
Well, see, I haven't read anything strictly in the new adult shelf, just mainly because I read a whole lot of not contemporary. I read mostly fantasy and sci-fi, which, going strictly off of like the age range of what new adult's supposed to be, which I think is like 18 to late 20s, maybe?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's almost all of epic fantasy, because, yeah, you look at Wheel of Time, Rand is a 14-year-old, he grows up to be an adult, becomes a king, and all this other stuff, you deal with everything that has to do with that. Same thing with Game of Thrones and stuff, so that's kind of one of the things I wanted to take away from this, is if new adult is a thing now, where we're officially going 18 to late 20s with the age range, does this mean that we retroactively add things like Game of Thrones, every other epic fantasy out there, or quest fantasy? So do those automatically become new adult? Because I was reading, which makes me wonder about this whole black and white that both Megan and Jen brought up. When I was reading the definitions of it on Wikipedia and a couple other websites, they suggested that new adult is actually supposed to be more gray than YA, and that the protagonist is often growing up to the point where they're having to deal with all these, what it means to be an adult, what it means to deal with a more serious life, like having to deal, oh crap, I have to get a job now, what the hell is that all about? Um, or I have to go to college and all these like really young life crises that
Crisis.
people go through. Yeah. Thank you. So that's what I was hoping to take away from this, mostly just to see if all the sci-fi fantasy nerds have really been reading New Adult all along, and the romance people are just suddenly catching on to the trend.
Which is how it goes a lot of times. You know, witches and werewolves and that sort of thing have been a staple in fantasy for a really long time, and they're just, you know, becoming a staple in romance.
Well, and I was actually going to say, I feel like though we've just recently defined new adult, I think that it's been around in romance for a long time as well. And that's a good question. Do we retroactively go back and add things to those shelves? Because, I was thinking of things like I just read Privilege of the Sword that Liz Maverick recommended, and those are, it's a historical setting, so the characters I think at the end are only 16 or 17, but they are debuting in society at that age, so they were pretty much new adults at that time. So I would actually have considered that new adult. So it's a good question. It's a good question. And I look forward to discussing it more, too, because I have a YA fantasy that I would say could also be considered new adult. So. But why don't we stop and everyone introduce themselves to the camera. I'll start. Hi, I'm Heather, and I co-run the site with Megan, and I live in Brooklyn, and I am drinking champagne tonight.
Champagne.
Yes.
It actually is champagne. I thought you were just justifying it because it was green.
Oh, no. No. Bubbles.
There are bubbles.
Ah.
Is it sparkling wine or is it champagne?
Oh, good question. Is it from the Champagne region of France or not?
Probably not. I'm gonna doubt that it's from there. It was pretty cheap.
Okay.
But champagne is champagne, right? So you guys already know this about me, but for everyone who doesn't, my favorite subgenres are probably contemporary and historical. I used to love paranormal a lot more. I read it rather sparingly now, but I do read it a lot in young adults, so I can't really explain that. I love every subgenre, but those are kind of my favorites right now. I read a lot of young adults. I read a lot of new adult now, and I'm a huge TV and movie nerd, as the rest of the staff can attest to. So that's me, Megan. Hi.
Okay. Hi, I'm Megan. I co-run the site with Heather. I live in Brooklyn also with my husband and son, who are thankfully not here this evening to see me. I am drinking Brownstone, 6-Point Brownstone beer. From
Not that you're advertising for it.
No. It's good beer. And
Free marketing.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, they need it. And I guess I was thinking that, like Heather, I don't read that much paranormal anymore. And I used to read it a lot as recently as 8 months ago, and a lot of urban fantasy. And lately I've been reading a lot of smut, and reading also interspersing that with historicals and trying to think, and that's probably mostly what I've been reading lately, mostly going by author rather than genre. So I'll follow authors into genres that I might not normally go into, which is how I got into the smut in the first place, because I started liking people's voices there. I haven't read a ton of new adult, but I'm open to it, and like I said, I did love On Dublin Street. I thought it was really amazing.
You haven't read Easy yet?
What?
You haven't read Easy yet?
No, I haven't. No.
You can have it back. I'll bring it on Monday.
Okay. All right. So that's me.
Jen, say hi to everyone.
Hello. My name is Jen. I'm kind of the assistant extraordinaire to the sites and the newest member. I live in Harlem. Fun times up there. No Renaissance to be seen, but anyway, I mostly read paranormal. I haven't exhausted the genre yet. I started out with contemporary back when I was in high school, but I've kind of moved away from it unless I'm following authors. Like Victoria Dahl is probably the only exception that I have in the contemporary romance field right now. I read a lot of young adult and new adult now that I've been introduced to the genre, and yeah, paranormal and historicals are where I kind of stand in the adult romance genre.
I love that we're covering the genre. Everyone reads something, and together we read it all.
Yeah.
Chris, say hi.
Hi, I'm Chris. I'm the general problem solver for H&H. Whenever, exactly, if you've lost your password, you've talked. I primarily read sci-fi fantasy. If you couldn't tell from just the whole thing going on, I got going on. I've not read many new adult, like I've said before. I started my romance education when I started working for H&H, which I began with Loretta Chase, or was it Loretta Chase? It was Loretta Chase. Uh-oh. Okay.
Or was it the Iron Duke?
No, it wasn't the Iron Duke. It came down between the Iron Duke and Mr. Impossible, and I went with Mr. Impossible and Rupert Carsington. And so I did enjoy that romance. Ever since on the side, I've ran a few Gateway Experiment things where you guys, the readers, have suggested stuff for me to read, and I read them. And some things I've really liked, and some things I
Not so much.
read. Some things
Some things I read.
and yeah, that's me. So
That's the H&H staff. Yay. So let's talk a little more specifically. Jen, I think you and I are the only ones that have read Easy. But what was that the first young or new adult that you had read, and why do you think that books like Easy and On Dublin Street are kind of suddenly a hot new thing to read? Like, what do you think is drawing people to the new adult genre?
I think it's because like so many people that I've talked to who read romance but haven't really liked young adult is that like they can't relate to those issues anymore that they cover in young adult, or they could in a very abstract sense. But yeah, I think that's a large issue why people didn't read young adult who you now find reading new adult. And I mean, most of the books are just like they're sexy and they're contemporary and they're fun. And I actually, when I first started reading Easy, I hated like the first 50 pages.
Oh.
Because I was like, girl, you do not know what you're doing. Like, what is wrong with you? Because she gets assaulted at the very beginning of the novel, so there's no spoilers there. That is something that happened. It's up front in the book. And she just like handles it in such a way that I never would have handled it in college. But then like as you read the book, you see her grow as a person. And I think that's why people read period. They want to see the growth of the character, and read new adult because like they might not relate to the young adult issues, but they can appreciate the growth that person goes through. And so I think that's why people like it as a book, and then like the sex makes it fun. So,
well, that brings up a great.
Oh,
What happened?
that was me. Sorry, Heather. I will edit that part out. You'll have to say that again. I think I muted you.
yes,
Oh, you're still muted.
still muted. Did you mute yourself?
Uh-oh. No, it says Christopher Morgan muted Heather Waters.
Check your microphone up top.
We did not want to hear what you said. We did not want to hear what you said.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Hi.
No, okay, go ahead and start wherever you were talking.
You know, Jen, that's actually a really interesting point in that I think one of Megan's recent morning coffees brought that up, the idea of are there things that you won't read, and how young is too young kind of thing. And, you know, the first commenter made a great point that it doesn't really matter about the age of the characters. It really is this a compelling read, and is there something that will make me want to read it? And I think that with young adult, I think a lot of people just might not even start a new or a young adult book because the kids are in high school. With new adult, it's a little easier in that it can oftentimes usually just double as, you know, a contemporary book, and the ages of the characters doesn't matter if you're sucked into it really quickly.
Yeah.
And that definitely happened to me with, you know, a book like Easy. Just the writing is really compelling. And I think that all of the women can probably relate to, you know, maybe not making the best choices in the evening after like a party or something, and walking home by yourself maybe when you shouldn't have. So even though, you know, the main character is not making the smartest choices, I think that any woman, no matter how old you are, can kind of relate to that, whether it's something they're going through now or something they went through in the past. So
I think. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
One thing that I was going to say in terms of relating to the characters is that I think Chris said that one of the definitions was that it was more gray areas of issues. But and so I've been processing that ever since he said it. And I think that what it is it's black and white characters with a YA mindset going into something and then having to deal with a lot more adult things that are gray areas for them to deal with, but they're looking at it with their black and white, you know, these people are cool and those people are not, and that's just the way it is. Right. And then the character growth is realizing that there are shades, and I'm not going to say shades of gray, but that there are nuances to people and their decisions and their actions. So whereas they start off with the black and white YA mindset, then they go through these issues that are a lot bigger, like getting a job or dealing with the death of somebody or a sexual assault or whatever it is, something that's more adult, that they then have to put their black and white mindset to and find that they have changed through the course of the book, which I think is just great writing.
Yeah,
and I think you see that especially in Easy, where she has kind of like this black and white mindset of, I'm going to follow my boyfriend to college, I'm not going to say anything after I'm sexually assaulted because that's not what you do. And then she learned, and even to the point of the hero, you know, she sees everything in these kind of black and white areas, and then she learns that it is more like everything is gray.
Well, and doesn't she kind of think he's like a bit of a punk in the beginning, and you know?
Yeah, because he's this dude who sits in her class and doodles, and you know has tattoos, and I think maybe a piercing and long hair, and like she's a preppy girl who her boyfriend like comes from a family where they name their children after presidents, like, you know. That's like her mindset, and she learns it's not what you should be and not what you have to be.
I want to be Wilson.
Wilson?
Yeah, there wasn't a Wilson. There was like a Kennedy, right?
They were Kennedy and Reagan and something else really dumb. I didn't like the third one.
Really?
Yeah.
Kennedy and Reagan in the same family?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I thought that was
the third
kind of
one.
a because I mean, people in Florida would name their kids like Pepsi, and there are some weird names.
Oh, no.
I had a friend whose name was Pepsi.
No, I had this.
What?
I had a friend whose good friend was named Pepsi or something. It's terrible.
Well, no, I had this back in Mississippi. I worked for this guy that the president of our student organization, his nephew and niece was named Dasani and Avion because their mother liked the bottled water.
No. No. I have these people that I know that they take in foster dogs and the litters are named after like designers or something like that. You name your dog after water bottles, not humans.
I was gonna say we name our foster dogs after like hockey players and
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who does
Although
that?
I have to say, we almost named our son Oakley after Charles Oakley of the New York Knicks.
Oh,
It
so
was
I'm thinking the sunglasses.
between his name and between what he got and then Oakley, but it was on the delivery table. And Scott's like, "Okay, is it going to be this or that?" And I said, "Oh." So it came close to being Oakley. So I'm sorry.
It was named after Heather Locklear, so
You were?
yeah. So I mean it
But at
happened.
least like you were like the names were after people, not product.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I was wondering, we were saying about this, like, we were talking about how in the first few chapters she's dealing with being sexually assaulted, which I'm assuming is what you meant by when you said assaulted, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, though, where's to say that that's more adult than when you have, like, Katniss, who has to go through, and Katniss from the Hunger Games,
Right.
when she has to go through and slaughter, like, 12, was it 12 people? No, 11 other people. No, I forget.
12, because there's 13 districts? Wait, are there 12 districts? I
No,
never.
there's 12 districts.
Well, the 13th district was like a
So
secret.
23 other people,
Yeah.
right? Two from each district? Is that how
Yeah.
it works? Okay.
Yeah.
So 23 other people. She has to completely slaughter them. So is this more of like her...
Well, no, she didn't kill Peeta though. Actually.
Okay, yeah.
Well, she is forced with the decision that she potentially has to kill 23 people.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
that's when she grew up in childhood.
And keep in mind, too, though, that the Hunger Games transcended the YA genre probably precisely because of these tough decisions that the character had to make that were universal and really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And many, many adults read that book, whereas they wouldn't have read something, they didn't read I'm trying to think of a big YA book, the Rick Riordan books, for example, that are huge.
But
Right? Yeah, those books. They didn't transcend. They didn't go over to
Right, and those were also made into movies. So it wasn't the fact that because it was made into a movie that they were reading it.
And like Sarah
Right.
Dessen. Sarah Dessen is an amazing contemporary YA author, but you don't hear a ton of adults talking about it. You hear
right.
unless it's like
So there's something to the Hunger Games, and there's something too on Dublin Street, for example, to move it back to the new adult thing, that goes beyond whatever genre it's been tagged, which is the same thing, basically as 50 Shades of Grey, which is way beyond what it was ever intended to be, and moved so far beyond its target audience that it's ludicrous and also awesome. So
you say 50 Shades. 50 Shades was initially I mean, I know this is way too erotic for what falls under new adult, but
Not necessarily. Maybe new
not
adults.
necessarily. On Dublin Street is
pretty explicit.
Mhm.
okay. So I mean, why won't 50 Shades fall under the new umbrella? Because I mean, you have pretty much essentially fan fiction for a YA novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a good point. That's a good point. But I think that there have to be some kind of well, and it's weird because it's almost like censorship at a certain point. Like after YA, should you really be telling people 18 up how explicit is too explicit for a certain genre? That's kind of weird. But
I think that's why, sorry to interrupt, but I think that's why new adult has kind of worked, because it is for an older age group, because you would find 12-year-olds reading young adult, and no way in hell would I want, but I wouldn't want a 12-year-old reading on Dublin Street,
But also, I feel like 50 Shades actually is a lot more YA in topic because it has that black and white decision. Do I sleep with him? I was going to say something else. Or do I not?
Yeah.
And it's not like dealing with something nuanced. It's dealing with an incredibly obsessive person who is completely obsessed to the point of not thinking about anything else. Whereas new adult has more of those issues, the way that on Dublin Street had all the sexual stuff that 50 Shades did, but she's also dealing with some serious trauma from her past that she actually does deal with and not just sweeps under the BDSM rug.
Well, but I would argue that part of that is the fact that it's translated from fan fiction, which by its nature you make assumptions about your readers, which is that they're already familiar with the world and the characters, so you don't have to develop them as much.
Right. Yeah.
You know, they're a little bit more sketched out, even if it's alternate universe, which is what 50 Shades was. But it's a good point. It's a fair point. And there are no answers. Does everyone just get to decide what is new adult for them? How is that going to work in a bookstore?
Well, that was the point that I wanted to bring up, is that, like, in the online world, we can put new adult wherever we want to, but where are we going to put it in a bookstore where people are actually buying books still? So
no, actually, now I'm thinking of like Jane Eyre and how they're kind of repurposing that. You'll find that in both the adult section and the young adult now. So maybe
I would argue that Jane Eyre is a new adult book. Actually, I was thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think that where they're going to tag new adult in bookstores is anywhere but romance, because I feel like they're pulling in all these readers that don't want this stigma of romance and bodice rippers and historicals. They're probably definitely not going to edge into historicals. They're just going to keep staying with contemporary romance, but probably not even category. They're just going to be sticking with this narrow, although it's not really narrow because it's so poorly defined, but this area that isn't historical, isn't super, what is super sexy? It isn't, doesn't have as many of the common romance tropes with which we're all familiar by now.
I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's why new adult could emerge as something that sticks around for a while.
Oh yeah,
because it's the acceptable romance.
Exactly, but I also think that it's kind of great for people like us that do love romance, because it's one of those things where we can kind of become evangelicals and maybe get someone to read a new adult book when they wouldn't read a romance. Then they'll realize, hey, you know, this is kind of a romance, and then maybe they'll bridge that gap eventually. And dive into romance. So I think really it's a good thing for us, maybe even more so than young adult is, just because the characters are older and there can be so much more overlap with contemporary. So I'm kind of all for this new genre. I'm excited about it.
Chris, you have something, right?
Well, I have a couple questions. First, this might be a whole nother topic for something else, but
look at Chris like bringing us back to earth.
Well, no, what constitutes a bodice ripper? It's something I've always been curious about since starting this job, and I don't know what really falls under the category of bodice ripper. I used to think that they were just like the 1980s historicals, where they were just like...
That's where it got started.
Yeah.
Production. I think it starts with
like Whitney, My Love, stuff like that. I thought that was the bodice ripper, but I have a feeling that it's this more umbrella term for romance, but that
well, in a derogatory sense, I would say.
Yeah, my mom growing up would call them all bodice rippers. For a while, I would read behind a more acceptable book whenever I had a romance novel.
I think it's, I actually get quite angry at people I meet in person when they say, oh, you read and write bodice rippers, because that's like saying that's referring to something that's now close to 30 years old, a perception that is completely wrong, just like, you know, all pop stars look like the Beatles. Well, they clearly don't anymore. And those books are not our books anymore. And they used to look like that, and they used to have rapey tropes, and they had actual bodice ripping, and they had the, you know, oh gosh, don't deflower me. Oh, I love it. Yay. But those books just simply don't exist, and so it's lazy and it's ignorant to call anything a bodice ripper now. And I mean, it's irresponsible in terms of journalism when people are like, oh, this isn't your mother's bodice ripper. Like, you know what? Screw you. My mother didn't even have these bodice rippers.
Creative.
I know. I get really angry, and I've gone off on people in person about it, just like I am now.
You talk to my mom.
My other question was then, does the way with the couple titles we're talking about tonight, Easy, On Dublin Street, does that fall under, is there a chance that it would branch over into lit fic, like literary fiction, where you could say, oh, I don't read genre, but oh, like you have a friend that doesn't read genre, that's like, I'm a lit major and I read only Dickens. Can you just hand them a book, say, try this? Because I know that like that's what part of the reason 50 Shades blew up was the way it did was the media picked it up as like, oh, this isn't romance, when everybody on the site was just like, please, we've been doing that for like 10 years now, so this is tame BDSM. So, I mean,
It's vanilla. It's vanilla.
yeah, so is new adult something that we can you can utilize to like branch out to people who aren't necessarily into the romance genre, but you can say, hey, try this out, you might like it, and oh, by the way, here, try some other things.
I Megan, what do you think? I feel like if you're,
I was going to jump in, and then I'm like, I talk too much.
no, well, I'm curious because I feel like I feel like genre is genre, and starting someone with like lipstick, it doesn't really matter if the characters are in their 20s. Like, I'm not really sure that's gonna help them bridge the gap to genre. But your question did remind me of I'm looking through my Kindle right now at what I've categorized as new adult, and two of them, it's this series that starts with I think it starts with the book Dark House by Karina Hale, and that's self-published, I believe, and it's about this guy and this girl, and they're kind of ghost hunters, and they have this show. So it's almost like an X-Files thing, but they record their sessions with the supernatural. And that I would categorize as new adult because of the age, but it's not really romance. It's I think there's going to be romance later in the series between the two protagonists, but right now it's not. There's just some like flirting and stuff. So it's almost like urban fantasy, I guess, for new adult age group. So I definitely think that there's a way to get people to come at it from maybe that angle, but I'm not sure about lit fic though.
I would say that unless the writing is really great and almost elegiac, I would imagine that the issues, such as they are with rape and probably other, equally meaty issues, will be translatable to the lit fic crowd. But I would imagine that the writing has to be that much more ponderous. It can't be the very quick way that we breeze through romances. It has to be a different style of writing. But I would think that there's going to be something like that comes out of this, that somebody in a master's program getting their MFA or whatever is going to start writing it, and it's going to be that kind of writing, if they haven't already, that kind of writing that has sex, that has these issues, that could be called new adult, that is going to appeal to people that don't realize they're reading a new genre.
So it's like women's fiction, new adult kind of thing? Is that what we're saying?
Women's fiction is like old adult.
But you know what I'm saying, like in terms of the fact that it's kind of written for women, but it's a little less full of sweet, I guess, than
yeah.
Is that what you're saying? But then they'll maybe focus it a bit younger and make it a little bit more.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, I think that just like 50 Shades got people that weren't romance readers to read romance, I think that somebody is going to come out of this new adult thing, then other people, they're going to start burrowing further into the new adult genre, and then maybe find some of the better, like more, I don't want to say better writers, because there's different style of writing. Find maybe the slower, more languorous kind of writing that might be more lit ficky than straight popping category or romance.
Confession, yeah. I don't know if I really want to read that though.
Well, I don't think you do, because you're a romance fan. If you want to read about relationships, yeah. If you want to read about relationships, but you don't want to read about it, did she not like what I said?
Yeah, she just walked off. She's like, forget it. Forget it.
That's it. I'm out. Pass the mic.
I'll take this part out. It's okay.
I'm
Okay.
just not that into you.
It's because I'm too old, isn't it?
Don't cut this out, Chris. This
You're
is
not
bad.
new adult enough, Megan.
I know, I'm definitely not. You know, it's funny. I was just talking on Twitter with an erotic author who I haven't read her stuff yet, but I love her on Twitter, and so I've got her next on the queue. And she's like, "Oh, I have to watch. My mom wants me to watch Girls. I don't know why. I don't know the backstory of this. Am I gonna? Should I be scared?" Twitter. And I was like, "I love that show, and I think I love that show more than any of you guys who's even seen it. And
That's
I'm clearly like I'm double the age of the protagonist, and it's
Well,
because
no.
well, yeah.
I can
Do you
go
think
on
that's
for.
why?
What?
Do you think that's why though? Because you're not in that.
Because
for
you're
me-
removed from it.
Yeah, because for me watching it, it's depressing. And my mom called me the day after the premiere and was like, "Heather, if I thought that's what life was really like for you in this city, I would have never let you move there." And I have to agree, like it paints kind of a depressing picture. To me, it paints a really depressing picture of what life is like here.
I think I think I like it not because I'm so far removed from it, but because I like
Not so far.
No,
not
no,
so far.
I know. I think I like it. I love Girls because I don't think it's real. It's a definitely stylized version of stuff that goes through. And I also feel like a lot of those same things and things that they might blurt out goes through my head a lot. I mean, the way I write is very different from what my age would seem to be, and the way I talk to you guys, right, is very different. I mean, you wouldn't think that I'm nearly twice some of your ages because I don't think I act like that. And I also really like grit in my fiction or whatever, whatever I'm absorbing. And Girls portrays a really gritty way of life. Gritty, very different from the noir that I love to read and watch, but it's still very gritty and very intense and visceral, and that's what I love about it.
Okay, so
It is, that's
this,
true.
no, I have a couple ideas, and I'm like, first off, I hate the show Girls because they're not like just entitled, stupid brats.
That's how you really feel, Chris.
Yeah, I was right.
I'm reining it in a lot here, and so this begs a question that a lot of things that have been going on in the gaming community a lot lately. So does gritty and dark automatically mean I'm more mature? Does it say I'm dealing with rape, so therefore I am intended automatically for a more adult audience? Because there's a whole lot of stuff going on in the gaming community with a couple of titles coming out. So does
I
gritty
actually.
and dark, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Finish your
No,
thought.
my idea was just, does gritty and dark automatically mean adult? So is it just, to bring the whole thing back to new adult, do we just say, oh, so now instead of Katniss having to deal with taking care of her sister, she now has to deal with the idea of being date raped? Does that make it automatically new adult?
I think with the show Girls in particular, the fact that it's so gritty and like the fact that their lives are so messed up, I think shows their immaturity rather than their maturity. Because
agree.
I am the exact age of those girls on, in the show, and I live a different lifestyle than they do, mostly out of choice. But I mean, in a different setting, I could be living in, where are they, Greenpoint or Williamsburg or something like that, and if I had made different choices, I would be going to warehouse parties in Brooklyn like they were. Maybe, but I think that the fact that it is gritty and that it's so like in your face with their issues shows their immaturity.
And I think it
And
gets
so
back
I
to the black and white thing, where, like in some of the best, I just watched a really great noir movie last night with Barbara Stanwyck, and the characters in it, there were a couple characters in it that were completely two-dimensional. And I feel like that's what a lot of noir fiction is like, certainly what a lot of genre fiction is like, but definitely noir fiction, especially the villains. And they have that like intensity and drive of this is the only thing I want, and I will do everything I can to get it. And that's kind of the way Girls is in some way, where the lead character just wants it to be all about her all the time. She's not likable. I wouldn't want to hang out with her. I love watching her story.
Yeah.
And I like that intensity, and I like that drive. And so anyway, so I don't think that, to go to Chris's point, I don't think that just automatically inserting an issue makes something new adult. I think that it's the character growth as they become actually adult, the adult part of the new adult part, that makes it mean something more than just a YA with sex.
And Chris, actually, maybe that answer that Megan just gave would explain why it seems like a lot of fantasy is new adult, in that their journey, you know, their actual literal journey is really, you know, character growth as well. Which brings me to what I've been wanting to talk about forever, Kristen Kashore's Graceling and Fire, which I love. And I think actually her most recent book, Bitter Blue, it's fantasy as well, and the character, I believe, is 18. So it's in the YA section, but she's the queen of her country, and she's dealing with some really, like, intense stuff. And I would actually argue that that's new adult, because it's so much more beyond just young adult issues. But it's in a fantasy setting, and we've had posters on the site say, you know, is new adult just contemporary? Can it go into other subgenres? And I guess I would argue that it can, and I guess I would like to hear everyone's thoughts on that. Can you see it Can you see new adult not only being fantasy and contemporary? Can you see it in other subgenres? What do you guys think?
Well, I mean, to go back to my genre, which is fantasy, urban fantasy, sci-fi. A lot of it has to do with how I approach my genre particularly, where if odds are, if the fact that elves and magic and aliens and stuff like this exists, if that's overpowering your plot, then no, you can't be new adult. I think from what I've gleaned from what we've talked about so far is that new adult is more themes. And so if genre, which I've always considered to be like mostly seasoning for a story, like, oh, well, my story is just about a guy who deals with the issues of God and religion, so I'm just going to sprinkle in actual gods and demigods.
Cut off the middleman.
Yeah.
Instead of dealing with like these like nebulous concepts, we're going to actually make physical beings that represent them, and that's how I've approached the genre. I mean, if you handle genre good, you don't treat genre like everything is all about just being a dragon. That's like, I hate stuff like that. That's like the stuff I read when I was like 16, and it was like Dragonlance, which I love Dragonlance, but it's not what I like now. But I'm getting distracted.
Dragonlance.
Yeah, Dragonlance. Yes. No, but like successful genre, like Neil Gaiman is really good at it, where the whole concept of your book, yes, it happens to be a fantasy setting, but you're able to deal with you're still dealing with these really intense stuff, like intense plots. So I think, yes, easily a young adult, as I understand it from the conversation we've had so far, young adult can easily bleed into every other subgenre, paranormal, urban fantasy, anything, but it seems like the core concept is still the same, right?
Yeah, I think... Oh, go ahead, Heather.
I was just going to say that I do understand the argument for it just being contemporary, in that contemporary, I mean, nowadays is really the time that you get to spend, like, your childhood is more defined than it ever has been before, and then your new adult stage is more defined because you have the college experience. And, you know, in the past, you were a child, and then you were married, and you were an adult, and so I can understand how it would be hard to define new adult with historical romance because 90% of your heroines would be considered a new adult. But I just
they aren't new adult. They aren't dealing
right,
with those issues. No.
right. It doesn't really work. So I do understand the argument that maybe contemporary is the only place for new adult because it's a new kind of phenomenon that you get to experience such a different stage in a life instead of just being you're a child and then you're an adult, deal with it. Now it's like let's explore how it feels to be making that transition, and I feel like you didn't really have that. So I do understand that argument too. So it'll be interesting to see, kind of how this develops. Jen, what were you going to say?
Well, I have one point actually that I just thought about. I mean, and it kind of goes back to what Chris was saying. I think that it goes back so much to the issues that are faced in new adult. And so what's to say that you can't have a paranormal where the heroine is facing the transition between being human and being immortal or something like that, and that could be her new adult issue, but it's still, I mean, and she's still in that age group, whatever the case. And I think that, we've seen the growth of romance so much because at the core it's always about the building the relationship between the hero or the heroine. Whether that's through sex or whether that's through, mutual understanding of one another or whatever. So I think that you can see that in new adult, can be paranormal as long as the main focus of the book is the growth of the character in a certain time in their life when they're making a major decision. But if we go with that definition, you get into a little gray area of like the coming of old age sort of thing, because that's another transitional period. That's not new adult, that's not what we're talking about. But so it's not, I guess it's a lot about transitions, but specific transitions that are in that age group. So why can't it be in paranormal as long as they're facing transition change in that age group?
I feel like the line is a little bit blurry though, with young adult and new adult, if it's just about the age, because a lot of young adult, like I'm thinking of Chocolate by Annette sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And that's taking that whole metaphor of growing up and deciding who you want to be, with the werewolf metaphor. So it's kind of a murky area there for me because I feel like it's kind of taking it back to, is it just about age that we're defining new adult?
See, I was wondering if we are operating from the conceit that this is all about age, and that's where we're drawing the line between young adult, new adult, adult. So then, is this back when I was doing my master's? It was it was new postmodernism. For getting into all that, is just a fragmenting of a particular academic field.
Right.
So then, is this emergence of new adult marking a fragmentation of genre? So are we just going to continually break genre up? So romance, you have young adult romance, you have new adult romance, you have mid-adult romance, you have midlife romance, you have...
Look at Chris bringing the scholarly argument to this.
As always.
I love it so much.
Can we start calling him Professor?
Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I'm okay with being called Indy.
Okay.
Does that mean we get to get you a whip?
I encourage that, yes.
For me to answer, just to go back to answer the question of would anything beyond what? Oh, sorry.
She's whipping us back into.
I have the whip. I actually would argue that fantasy and the like, even though it might have some of those same transition things, Jen, that you talked about, I would still say that the prime way that people are relating to these books is through real life issues. And I don't think that figuring out how to rule a kingdom properly through the application of magic is a real life issue that could then be called, be tagged like a new adult kind of thing. I feel like the real part of it is what long time ago in the conversation, Heather talked about the reality of a sexual assault on a woman, no matter what her age or anything like that. That's something real that we deal with all the time in real life. And we don't deal with these other things, even though they may be just as important and portrayed just along the same lines in the fiction as it would be if it were a real issue. But because it isn't, I don't feel like it could be called new adult. I still feel like it's contemporary.
That's fascinating to me, though, because, what about young adult? Young adult mixes all those subgenres. I'm kind of curious about why is it okay for young adult but not for new adult? What do you think is the difference?
Well, I think that...
Hold on, guys. We lost Jen just now.
So, recap. I had just said... Keep the kitty on!
She's not going to. She hates being held.
I'm surprised my cat hasn't walked past the screen yet.
Mine are in the closet.
You know what? It's 2013. They can come out of the closet now, Chris.
Oh.
Oh, Jesse wants me to specify that they're not in a closet. They're in a bedroom.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Same difference in New York.
Okay. I think that the reason that YA is very different from NA is young adults have that much more, the kids reading those books are much more able to, what?
The kids.
Oh, shut up. I'm not being dismissive. People, the target audience of that demographic at whom that's aimed is people with a lot more active imagination and fantasy life that aren't yet dealing with real issues.
Wow, Megan, what?
Boom. Laying the gauntlet down on my entire genre.
Oh my god.
No, I think it's good. No, I think YA, I think that the audience isn't yet dealing with real life issues, so they have to practice by dealing with these issues through fantasy and through their imagination.
My issues feel pretty real, Megan.
What?
I said my issues feel pretty real.
Well, I'm not saying for you. I'm saying the
new
kids
adult, and I am the target genre
of YA. Of YA? No,
okay.
I'm talking YA.
Okay.
Not NA, which has real issues and real.
Hold on. I really want to know this. So, you saying that me as a fantasy reader, that the fact that I read like Neil Gaiman, Steven Erikson,
Really struggling over there.
I'm drawing a blank mostly
You're
because
looking at your bookcases, aren't you?
I am looking at my bookcases right now. Very fractured. Glenn Cook. Haha, see? This is what happens when my computer faces bookshelves. So you're saying that by reading those authors, that because they're writing about magic and elves and flying whales in the stake of Glenn Cook and military campaigns, that those are somehow less legitimate and less dealing with life.
No, there's no judgment about legitimacy or not. That's your interpretation of what I'm saying. I'm saying that the kids
Just got real here, guys.
that are in these books aren't yet having to deal with paying bills.
So
They're
you're
having to deal with emotions.
But in a fantasy world, they don't have to pay bills at all.
What?
Necessarily. They barter a goat and they get a sword.
Right. Well,
It's not really bill. Their electricity isn't going to get turned off. They might get smited by the wizard, but I mean...
But I feel like, and Chris, you're taking offense on the behalf of the fantasy genre when the fantasy genre is not what I'm talking about. I was talking about YA.
I'm kind of taking offense for YA, though.
Well, YA, why is it okay for YA? Because, it's not as universal.
I feel like is there as much angst? I mean, is it really fair for us to say what feels more, what feels as big as like paying bills for a young adult? You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like
I do. I know. It may not be fair, but I feel like this is a practice run. These kind of things, and also, the books that are popular for YA that are like contemporary are like the wimpy kid books, right? I mean, they're a little younger. They're like middle grade. But I've read some of them, and all they are is about, you know, who's cool and who's not, and how nerdy are you, and whatever. And it's things that you can be really judgmental about as a kid. Whereas if you have a quest behind which you can all get behind, like there's an absolute. It's not like I want to be a cool kid or not, or whatever. Anybody can dismiss that depending on what clique you're in school. But if all of you have a common universality of this is right and this is wrong, and we need to defeat the dark mages and do whatever, then I feel like it's acceptable to be in YA fiction because it's dealing with so much bigger issues. I feel like fantasy opens things up for these YA age readers, not people who are reading YA who are not young, but those people. It's more universal things because they are black and white, to get back to it, and it's something that everybody can deal with.
So just to make sure I'm completely understanding you, Megan, so we're saying that it's okay for fantasy to...
I'm so not being funny right now, by the way.
I mean, it's okay. No, I really want to understand this. So you're saying that it's okay to use fantasy as a medium for, like, to get, like, for example, going back to Hunger Games, it's a transitional YA. We all can agree on that. So... Yeah. In that sense, it's a fantasy setting. So, I mean, not fantasy, but it's a futuristic setting. So, in that sense, it's fantasy.
Yeah.
So, in a sense that a Katniss having to kill, like, brutally murder 23 other people that are around her age and deal with things like having to feed her mom because her mom is so depressed from her dad's death, that because this is in a fantasy setting, it's more easy for a younger person to process those kinds of hard choices, life choices, to where a 20-year-old would have to really address the fact that, like, a close family member dying or being date raped or...
Well, you do see that in YA, though. That's not just new.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that in YA...
I think we're looking at the audience rather than the genre.
Yeah.
I think that's important to remember.
Right.
In this instance, Katniss is the Hunger Games instead of what or young or new adult, where it's a whole like genre dealing with growing up. So instead of dealing that, you're trying to break these kids into the idea of there's a whole other world out there that you're going to have to deal with eventually, but for now, here's just a bunch of wizards that represent that new world.
Right, and I also feel like a lot of that you can apply that same kind of way of looking at things at paranormal. Like, why is it okay for so many different types to be in paranormal, whereas we don't read multicultural romance? We don't read about black heroes in real life having sex with white women, whereas we read about vampires having sex with humans. Why is that acceptable? And mainstream romance reading audiences won't take the reality. I think because it does take it out of the real enough so you're not actually confronted with the real.
Which is just depressing. God,
I'm sorry.
No,
It's almost bringing everything down. I'm sorry.
No, this whole question. I mean, it reinforces the whole point of like escapist literature and all this other stuff. But that's going into whole other literary thing.
Well, I read for a happy ending, or actually, I read for an absolute ending. I read for either incredible death and despair in like noir fiction where everything is horrible and people die and people get killed, or I read for a happy ever after. I don't read for amorphous literary fiction endings.
And then they live.
What?
Like, you don't read for an and then they live sort of thing. You want to...
Right, and then
they're all died or they all lived happily ever after.
Right. I used to read those books when I went off, when bodice rippers really became rapey, and I was put off by them, and the writing was terrible, and I was an English major. I kept reading literary fiction, and a lot of it's great writing, but it depresses me. Whereas the escapism of the noir, even though it's incredibly gritty and dark and full of murder and people... But I'm never going to meet those people in real life. I'm not going to meet a duke. I'm not going to meet a vampire. I'm not going to meet Katniss. You know, I can read about them and escape into their worlds for a little bit and have a great time doing it, which is maybe why I'm okay with reading new adult, being that I'm not a new adult, and that I've already dealt with the whole sex obsessive love thing and, you know, whatever. And
Well, no, I do gotta say
Not
that.
to brag or anything.
yeah, I
Me.
I've had obsessive love before.
know.
I gotta say that I used to always say back when I was like college that I wanted a fantasy story that like, okay, so Frodo threw the ring into Mount Doom. So what happened now? Oh, he went to Grey Havens. But what happened to like the 20 years in between that? And I want his story. I want what happened after they beat the evil overlord. But then I read it, and it's one of the reasons I fell in love with Glenn Cook. His whole series was really military fiction. It's called the Black Company series. But he wrote this book that was followed the series, but it was outside of it. Like it didn't follow any of the main protagonists.
Wait, I have to interrupt for 1 second. Jen, push your glasses up. Because
No,
you're
you look like
looking
a
like a
librarian.
sexy
I'm
librarian right now, and it's
bothering
really
me.
distracting.
I'm sorry, the glare is bothering me,
It's like,
and I can't breathe through my nose. So like, I just kind of have like a natural pout thing going on. I don't
I'm sorry, I totally derailed Chris's military history.
no, I
Is
can
that better now? There's a nice glare on my glasses. And I'm still in my mouth.
just
And
go without the glasses like I do, and then get really squinty-eyed.
is that better? I could get this close so that I can see you guys.
I can't see anybody. You guys would see up my nostrils if I got close.
Yeah,
Do we all wear glasses? That's
Yeah,
We
we
all
do.
wear glasses because we're all readers, and we spent all our formative years staring at small print. But
in the dark.
in the
In the
dark,
dark.
Little
I read underneath the
sitting in
cover.
the bed. No, what I was saying is, the one time I came across that was the first time I did really was Glenn Cook, and he wrote this book like it was a aside really to show what happened to all these tertiary characters. It was called The Silver Spike, and pretty much the ending was yeah, and then the hero and heroine married, and they had a bunch of grandkids, and when they would talk about how they defeated the evil overlord, all their grandkids would be like, "Oh, you so crazy, Grandpa." And they just went off. And I was like, that was one of the most unsatisfying endings to a series that I've ever, or endings to a book that I've ever come across. Getting back to Megan's point of you go for absolutes.
That's
And
why I hate epilogues. And I know I am in the minority, but I love epilogues.
That's another topic, isn't it?
Yeah.
I got ruined on an epilogue. I loved a book, and then the epilogue, they're like, and they were 6 years old, and he buried her, and like,
Yeah.
talked about them
That's
dying.
literary fiction right there.
But it was a romance.
was it Harry Potter?
No, it was a romance. I was so pissed off.
Buried? That's terrible.
Yeah, because her gravestone said something like "forever next to the man of her dreams" or something like that.
Was this
And so that was the ending
Who
line.
wants to think about old penis after you've read a romance? I don't. I want to think about young, doing it all the time.
Yeah.
Penis.
Well,
Was
for
this,
me,
You bring the penis talk. I'm just gonna put that
was
out
this
there.
Nicholas Sparks? Was this Nicholas
most
Sparks?
of the epilogues that I read are like 35-year-old penis, so I'm fine with that.
Hey.
But like,
Tony did not bring Nicholas Sparks.
Well, she's the one that's talking about depressing endings, and I mean, nothing's more depressing than Nicholas Sparks. Can we just all agree on that?
it's true.
I don't even think I would say depressing. I think I would say incredibly melodramatic, which he hates having his stuff referred to as melodramatic, but I think that's what it is. I mean, I think when everything right ends with some kind of death and despair, or at least some part of your book deals with that, I think that's melodramatic.
What about that one with the kid from High School Musical? How did that one end? Where he was
Calling me St. Cloud.
No.
a soldier and he found like the
The
picture.
Sparks one, where he's the soldier, and he finds the picture.
Oh, the lucky one.
The lucky one.
One.
I like that. I should say I have seen
Did
everything.
that one have a happy ending?
No, you have not.
Look, I go to see bad romantic comedies and dramas all the time. Like, I might hate this, but I'm gonna go see it. That said, I tend to think that for some reason I go to see all the bad ones in the theaters, and then it's the good ones that I have not ended up seeing. Like, What's Your Number? I love that movie.
Me too. Oh my god.
I wanted to see that. That looks so good, and then it got trashed so bad.
I have it on DVD. I can bring it
Can I
on
borrow
Monday.
it?
Yeah, I'll bring that in easy on Monday. It'll be good times.
Good. All right.
And that actually could be new adult, back to our new adult conversation.
I know, and I was also thinking about the slut shaming in that movie.
No. So you're saying that what's her number is new adult, so then would be
Well, I actually think she's
pushing it.
I think she's a bit old, possibly actually. But the point of that movie is kind of accepting that to be in love should be to be yourself, and I think that's kind of
Yeah, it's about accepting yourself.
so
That's like women's fiction.
Yeah.
Don't say
But
that.
better, because it has Chris Evans naked.
Yeah.
This
He looks amazing in that movie. Can I just say, like, I feel
Oh
like
my god.
he's
oh
best.
god.
Oh
not-
my god.
He's not super skinny, but then he's not like huge like he is in Captain America, which I actually
Yeah.
don't think is that bad.
He's just like normal muscular
Normal muscular?
and in a band.
Ooh.
What is
Yeah.
normal muscular?
Yeah, he's a singer.
What is normal
Yeah,
muscular?
he's normal, like, you go to the gym, but you're not a superhero.
But you don't look like you go to the gym, so
Exactly. Yeah, you just do, like, pull-ups on a fire escape.
Or as Captain Hammer would say, I don't go to the gym. I'm just like this.
I'm just like this. Yeah, right.
Quoting Joss Whedon for the first book club, it had to happen.
No, so my question then would be kind of where we're going with this. Does new adult then need a romance? I know we're a romance site, so we're going to focus on the ones that have romance. But can you have a new adult book that exists without having to deal with relationship issues?
Yes,
Like,
But will it do as well? No.
Well,
Yeah,
no
you
books.
can have it, but will it do
Every
well?
book has a romance, whether it's a romance between well, this is my argument forever. I think every single book has a romantic element in it, even if it's not a traditional relationship. It's Jack Reacher in love with how free he is with just his toothbrush and his car. Or, I mean, that's the core relationship there, is the solitude. He's in love with his solitude. Or any book, you know, you have to feel passionate about something in order to make a reader care. Like the character has to want something really, really badly in order to make the reader care about it. Because you don't just, except for actually Ann Tyler's The Accidental Tourist, where he didn't really care, but then it ended up that he did really care, but at first he's totally bleh. So they made that change there too, but, you know.
I just want to point out that the moderator the community manager for a romance community is pointing out that every book ever is about romance.
I guess I'm biased.
Everything is romance.
I just think, I honestly think it is, and I think it, although actually that could be my own, that's probably my own view, because I started reading books looking for the relationship. We've talked about that on the site a lot, about looking for the relationship, which is why we cover the relationship angle of books that aren't romance. Like, one that's been coming up lately is the Dorothy Sayers series of mysteries with Lord Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane, I think. Harriet Vane? Anyway, there's an essential romance between them, and when they get together, in the 5th book of the series, I believe, it was like a big to-do, even though it's a detective series, of a guy that is an aristocrat that doesn't chase people down alleys and has a knife or anything. He just uses his brain, so it's really not compelling in that way. But it's incredibly compelling.
and that's why we cover a lot of TV on the site, because there are a lot of shows that aren't built originally, you know, to feature a romance, but you have shippers for various romances, and a lot of times by the end of the show, a romantic relationship has developed, like, you know, with the X-Files.
Right.
Yeah.
Because the fans feel that passionately about it. So.
Yeah, and I think it's almost like a human condition. Like, you all want to find your other half, whether that is a platonic other half or a romantic other half. And so I think, like, in TV shows especially, you're looking for that. And so eventually you become interwoven into the series.
And to be tautological, sex is sexier. So the relationship romance part is a lot sexier to people.
I would like to lodge a complaint, though, that I am officially out of beer.
with whom are you lodging a complaint?
Yeah.
Like, we're all, yeah. Mock you.
I'm fair to say though, I've had 2 beverages the entire time.
Oh my gosh.
Because I'm sick, and so I woke up this morning and I had no voice, and so I was a little afraid that with drinking wine that I would not have a voice by the end of this. So I got a nice coffee.
You're a two-fisted drinker, is what you're saying.
I'm a two-fister. Yep, right there.
I'm out of everything, so unless I want to move on to whiskey, so I'm going to be.
I think next book club we can do that.
Next book club is a whiskey book club?
Or gin.
Gin?
Just saying.
Hard liquor.
Hard liquor book club. That's going to be a very interesting book club.
Yep.
You guys, I think this is the next thing.
We'll have to pick a very special topic. Well then, I think we should wrap it up. I think that what we have decided is that there's definitely a lot of room for debate in this new genre, and I think we're all going to be very curious to see how it turns out.
Well, before we go, I wanna ask: did we decide on guidelines for new adult? Like, what is new adult? Do we now retroactively add things to the new adult bookshelf?
Well, I kind of want to throw that out to readers. I'd be curious to see what they think, because I personally, when I'm organizing my Kindle, I have just gone back and gone through my library and said, okay, what is new adult, and I'll put it in that way. But that said, I'm okay with double dipping, so I'll have something in contemporary romance that I also have in new adult. That's fine with me. So I'd be kind of curious to hear what readers think, and whether they think that they would go back and categorize things in their past libraries, or if they're just moving forward, or if they are okay with double dipping or not. You know, I'm kind of curious to hear that. I think in that sense, it would be up to the bookseller or the reader.
I agree.
So, final thoughts then? Heather, go. Final thoughts.
Oh God, the pressure. Let me drink.
How we face all new problems at H&H. Hold on, let me
It's a new adult solution, I think, actually.
What are you trying to say?
Heather develops alcoholism in dealing with the trauma of her life.
Joke, people, in case any of you are actually worried about Heather's well-being, she's not an alcoholic.
And if I were, Jen would be my sponsor.
Yeah, really.
Or she's a really fancy alcoholic. I think you're just a really fancy alcoholic because you're drinking champagne over there. You're like a rapper.
True.
Yeah.
Next book club, I'm getting Boone's Farm if I can find it in this city.
Oh my God.
That's right, Chris is from Texas. If you didn't know.
Wait, I was worried that we hadn't been reminded he's from the South recently. Thank you for giving props up to that.
I'm from Texas.
I'm from Florida.
And I went to school in Mississippi. And Florida is in the South.
But seriously though, final thoughts. I love new adult, and I'm just kind of fascinated to see what's becoming the next big thing. I've been kind of stalking Goodreads, to be honest, and just kind of keeping an eye on what everyone's been reading, what the ratings are. I just actually downloaded a new book that I'm excited to read, and I don't have it downloaded yet. But so I'm just kind of keeping my eye out. I've been reading a lot of stuff, and I'm looking forward to reading a lot more. And I think I'll definitely have to check out more Deborah Weber. And yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes. I love it, but I love young adult too. So for me, it's not much of a leap.
Megan?
Oh, I love romance pretty much no matter what subgenre it's in, usually. I mean, there's some things I don't like, but so
well, as long as it's well written, I'll read in any subgenre.
Right,
so I
right.
Kind of,
talking about categorizing, I'm really anti-categorizing, except for in my Kindle it is kind of crucial. But I put On Dublin Street in my smut section, and I don't have a new adult section. I do have a YA section that has very few titles in it. And I will get there, and I will read everything. But my probably, actually, my biggest Kindle section is historical, followed by smut, and that's where I put On Dublin Street because it was smutty, and that's one of the reasons I liked it.
And really, in that sense, the age, as long as they're 18 and over, of course.
Right.
You know, in that sense, it doesn't really matter, I guess.
Right.
By categorization that way.
Yeah.
Jen?
How about you?
Jen, did we lose you?
Jen.
Oh, okay. You kind of.
Final thoughts, Jen.
I think we're having...
Yeah, I think we're having some technical
robots
difficulties
again for a second. So, it's very entertaining on my half. Cool difficulties because everyone sounds like a robot. So yeah, it's great. So I hope you can all hear me okay.
We're going to remix it and make an H&H album.
Yes.
Auto-tune the H&H.
Yeah.
That's right.
Jen, can you do that robot dance for us?
Yeah, the robot dance that you were doing in the break.
Oh, okay. Okay, wait. That's the one I'm really good at. The swinging arm. Yeah.
I can see.
Little. You see what I do in the crowd. That's what happens right there. You just saw some magic. So I had thoughts, right? That's where we're going with this?
Yeah.
Okay. New adult. Like Heather. Wait, are people talking? I can't tell. No? Okay.
No,
Anyway,
just go.
I'm very confused right now.
It's all you.
Okay, I'm talking.
All you.
No one else
All
is.
you.
I'm kind of reading lips right now. Me. Yay! Thanks, Megan, for that little cue right there. Okay, new adult. Oh God. I, like Heather, liked young adult. You know, from the outstart, and so it was an easy transition for me to get into new adult. I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of where it goes from this point. What? Yeah. Anyway, I can't understand anything, so I'm just gonna talk. Yeah, so it was an easy transition for me from young adult to new adult. I like that they talk about serious issues that I enjoyed in young adult, but I think they made it more fun and you see more growth.
I see what you did there.
Oh, an easy transition. Easy. I got it now. I got it. I like puns. It just takes me a little while to catch on. Thanks, Heather. I appreciate it. Like I said, I couldn't understand anything for a little bit.
Team H&H has a little running chat here, so yeah, we can talk to each other. That's where that came from.
Oh, yeah.
We're not all psychics, so sometimes...
No, but wouldn't that be awesome?
It would be awesome.
My dream is to have some
We
sort
should
of...
have an implant.
I don't want you guys in my head.
What are you scared of, Megan?
Well,
Why are you
like,
scared of-
maybe there could be, like, a wall. You know, like, you have a wall where you have your private thoughts, and then, like a cell phone, but in your head.
Or like if you were Animorphs and we were in animal form, we would be able to hear.
Cell phone. I want to get back to this whole you have a cell phone in your head thing.
I want to know what animal I'd be if I were an animal.
You'd probably
I could be a sloth.
Several quizzes online.
No, you'd be a cat.
I was a horse a lot.
But you had to like touch the animal in Animorphs, right? To be able
Yeah,
to
you had to touch it.
Yeah.
You had to touch it.
So
So
you'd
I'd
be
be
a
a cat?
Yeah.
You'd be.
I could nap a lot.
And I'd be a dog. Because
Right.
the dogs are around here somewhere.
I guess
Okay.
I would be a
I'd
cat.
be a
That's not very exciting.
We would all be cats. That's really boring.
Dogs versus cats. That'll be our next book club. Dogs versus cats.
Okay.
That'll be like a 2-minute
Cats.
discussion. It'll be cats all the way. Come on.
Yeah,
I
Let's
think
be
so,
real.
because you know what? When you have the choice between knows where to poop, poops wherever. I just got to say,
I don't know what kind of dogs you've been around. My dogs don't poop wherever. No.
they would if you didn't take them outside twice a day.
Slap them on the nose, they would poop wherever they wanted.
Yeah.
Twice a day? What kind of animals have you been rearing? I don't
Don't you have
understand.
to take dogs out twice a day?
More than that, my friend. More than
Oh,
that.
maybe they're just trying to get away from their spouses. They're writing literary fiction. I'm gonna take the dog out. I don't know.
Oh god.
I've never been around a dog.
Oh my
Spouses.
God.
That's what I'm taking away
Ever?
from this discussion tonight. Dogs hate their wives.
Come visit my house and you can hang out with
much.
awesome dogs.
I'm allergic
The dogs?
to everything. I know, see? We had to have a backup
We can get
plan
you-
for Kiki. If I could.
Poodle. They're hypoallergenic.
I know poodles, they're expensive though. They're like $1,000.
But they're hyperallergenic, aren't
They
they?
have to be brought outside
Yeah.
at least once. I thought twice a day to go poop. I'm not doing that.
Speaking of cats and dogs, I think you having war right now. I don't know if anybody else can hear like growling.
Yeah.
Kind of intimidating, and I don't want to look behind me.
Okay.
Anyway,
But Chris,
final thoughts.
what are your final thoughts on Rudolph?
I'm
Are you going to read any? Are you going to read some, my
not
friend?
sure. Yeah, I mean, definitely. I will read because I like staying on top of what we're doing on site, but I'm still curious to see where they go with this. Initially, I thought it was strictly a contemporary thing, like Megan said. I don't really. Uh-oh.
Ah, we're done.
I'll wait. Do, 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 do.
Na, 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 na.
He's back.
Oh, there she is.
Okay, so what I was saying was I will probably hang out. What I thought was that initially it was just going to be a contemporary thing. Going through my research, I found that a lot of people were retroactively adding a bunch of stuff to the new adult umbrella, which I don't agree with because when the people wrote in that, they didn't really think that they were right. Yeah, they didn't target that. It's not like an agent called for, I want new adult fantasy, so you can't really add what they did to the bookshelf.
Though that said, I mean, Megan, when you were writing Vanity Fair, you weren't writing for a particular genre. So
No,
I
and I,
wonder, would an author ever write?
no. Well, a bad author would. I think a bad author writes to market.
Hey, Cat's here. I don't know if you're going to see him. You'll have-
Oh,
I saw a tail.
I saw.
There.
Oh. So no, I don't think that any author. I also don't think any author can say what they are writing or what they are not writing, because I feel like it goes back to Kant, where I don't think you can.
Hey, Kant. Always comes back to Kant.
Because I don't think that anybody that creates anything really knows precisely what they are doing, because so much more is going into it and the subconscious is there. And so, no, I don't think it's valid to even say they were or they weren't. They thought they were writing this or they thought they were writing that. Some of the best music comes out when people are trying to recreate stuff that they love to listen to, but they are poor at it. So it comes out totally twisted and awesome and great and original, but they're like, oh, we're trying to do a soul band. They're like, yeah, you're high.
You're
So,
telling me again to summarize that you can't escape him.
You guys and your puns, I swear, I am not drunk enough for this.
You get that
I am. I appreciate puns in all their forms, even when I'm sober.
yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Well-
I'm just curious to see where it goes from here.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks everyone for your thoughts and for the fun times tonight. We will have to talk soon about what our next topic will be.
Yep.
I'm voting for maybe fan fiction to publish fiction, actually, because the 50 Shades comment that we had earlier in the conversation was really interesting, and that I thought it was fascinating that we were suddenly talking about kind of how underdeveloped some aspects were, and how that could be explained by the fact that it was originally fan fiction.
Well, you have a bunch of authors right now, don't you? You have Wallbanger, you have 50 Shades, you have
Marissa Meyer.
Mel Jean Brooks, the author, though, wasn't she discovered in a fan fiction community?
Yeah.
Yep. And
Cinder?
Marissa Meyer, yeah, I mean, lots of great authors. Vegan, who wrote the Cassandra Clare? Cassandra
Oh
Clare.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So, I mean, lots of Harry Potter, I believe, actually. So a lot of great authors have come from the big fandoms recently, and I think we all know I'm a big fan of fan fiction, but I also am aware of its limits um, in terms of how it can be translated. So, like, I think fan fiction would need a lot of work to become a novel that can stand on its own. So I'd be interested to talk more about that.
Yeah, I think so. It'd be fun.
But we will save that for next time then. And you guys all have a great night. And Heather is signing off.
Yep.
Have a great
Have a
day.
good night, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.